It's time for OWC Radio. Tech Talk with creatives. Fun, informative, futuristic. OWC Radio's Creative Club. Conversations with host Cirina Catania.
This is Cirina Catania with OWC Radio. I am speaking today with Dan Kneece, who is a longtime Steadicam operator and now a cinematographer. We call them DPs in our business. And Dan, I'm so happy to talk to you on the air because you're just a rarity in this town, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about. Let's just start almost at the beginning, when you were a little boy. You know, I like asking people what they liked to do when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. What were you like as a little boy, and what was life for you growing up?
I grew up in the small town of Blackville, South Carolina. It had a population of about 2,000 people and surrounded by swamps and alligators, and it's 10 miles from Barnwell, South Carolina, where James Brown was born, and 14 miles on the other side of that is a little town called Allendale, where Jasper Johns grew up.
Wow.
So, and I think what really happened in the area, people are saying there must have been something in the water, but I think really what happens is it's so darn boring down there that if you have a creative urge, you got to figure out a way to get it out or you're going to go nuts.
You need time to be creative, and I think in a busy life in the cities, we don't often have time. I totally agree with you. I think some of my most wonderful memories are escaping when I was a little girl from my house and climbing into an apple tree to write poetry and just think about the meaning of life. So I think when you're in a small town, that's what happens, right? That's great.
It's really like there's not too much trouble you can get into, because even if you go out in the woods and get lost, the dog knows the way home. So, and I was always sure. So you just follow the dog out of the swamp, and you're back in your little town, and I grew up from a very young age. But when I was a baby, my mother would take me and put me in the playpen, but rather than turn on the television set, she'd put on classical music on on the record player. Mm. And so I know all of the melodies from all the classics of classical music. So that was kind of an interesting way. It helped my brain develop musically early, and then that took me in a musical direction for a while. And then in working as a camera operator or a Steadicam operator, the music helped define beats of a scene. Mm-hmm. So you'd have movies are interesting. They have a beginning, a middle, an end, loud parts, soft parts, fast parts, slow parts, just like a piece of music. Mm-hmm. And so when people would have me shoot music videos or do music scenes in movies or things like that, I was very attuned. I knew when the downbeat was. I knew where the camera needed to be at a certain point, and it really helped me. And it's the kind of thing that you never thought you'd use in a million years. The other one was when I took typing in high school. I said, I'm never going to use this, and I spend hours on the computer every day. So. I was when I was in the 7th grade, I won a medal for playing Overture Eroica on the oboe, and but I would bounce around in the band from oboe to saxophone to some of the horns to some of the drums. It was a very fluid and fascinating thing for me, and we had pianos in the house, and I could kind of poke on those. I was, as a kid, I was pretty lucky that I could pick up almost any instrument and get some sort of musical sound out of it. I still have some instruments and things, and I dabble in it still, but I mainly concentrate on being a director of photography. But again, that sort of upbringing when you're young, that pre-wires your brain to think in different ways than just the normal regimented ways of thought. It connects different synapses in your brain because mm-hmm. musically is your brain when you're a youngster, like 3, 4, 5 years old, 2 years old, 1 year old, your brain is a recorder and it's just sucking in everything it can get. And that's why you don't use too much profanity around little kids, because they'll remember that, But it's every kind of input you can get. Your brain is programming itself. And then when you get to be our age now, you got a lot of stuff in there, so every once in a while you forget something. But I was talking to one of my friends, and I said, it's not as easy to learn as when you're a little kid. And he said, well, your brain's full. You filled your brain full of stuff, I mean, a lot of times now, though, if you get into situations where you're working really, really hard over and over many hours, your brain goes on sort of automatic, and you don't even have to think a thought through. It comes automatically out of your head that you need to do this and this and this, and it becomes like an automated function in a way. And but you have to be careful of that and override it, because you don't want to be doing the same thing over and over and over, because you want to keep creating things. And I tell people a lot of times, if you have a creative mind, you have to keep it busy, because like in between jobs, if you're not working, your mind's still going to be creative. It's just, it'll start creating negative things instead of positive things. So you always have to keep it occupied and keep good things going through your head, because you don't want it to turn on you,
Yeah. So how long did you live in this small town before you left?
Until I was about 17 or 18 years old, and then I went to the University of South Carolina. And I come from a family of doctors for hundreds of years. My grandfather was a doctor. My father was a doctor. My little brother is a doctor. My mother was a pharmacist. I didn't want to be a doctor. I was the one who had to go wash the blood off the front porch with the water hose when people come to the house after hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it wasn't really the blood that I didn't. It was just my mind was clicking away.
Mm-hmm.
And it still does. Every once in a while, I'll start thinking about something creative. I'll go to sleep, and in the middle of the night, I'll pop open, and it'll still be going. It's like it's doing its own thing. I can't really. It's like your mind is a computer. It's a biological computer, and it's going to run programs when you're asleep. It's dreams. It's doing its maintenance. It's setting itself up for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you have things that you have to do the next day, whether you have trauma that you have to wash out of there, whatever you've got going on, your brain is going to deal with that in the way that it knows how to do. And that's, when you go to sleep, that's why you need to sleep, because your brain needs time to do maintenance. It's like defragmenting your hard drive almost in your sleep.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I'll just stop, and then when I wake up, the answer's there. So, you do chug
Mm-hmm.
at night. And creativity, I don't know that we can control the muse. It just, she's there when we need her. When we don't want her, she's there. When we do want her,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes she's there. Like, she just comes at the craziest times. Were you into still photography at all when you were in high school? You were studying music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did a lot of still photography. We had these things called Polaroid cameras, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't think many people have anymore, but that was like, it was fun to take a picture with that and then watch it appear before your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the first ones, when the picture would come out of the camera, you had to peel it apart, and then you had another little thing with a wiper on it, and you had to wipe on the Polaroid image to fix it, or it wouldn't stop developing,
Mm-hmm.
And but then we had a lot of film cameras. When I was in college, I took hundreds of still pictures. But what really got me in the movie direction was when I was 13 years old. My mother bought a Super 8 camera, and I started filming everything. And I learned immediately what worked and what didn't with that camera, because it didn't have a reflex viewfinder; it had a parallax viewfinder. So I wasn't actually looking through the taken lens. So the first few films, when I got close-ups, they were not framed properly because you weren't looking through the lens. And so I kind of figured that out. And that was back when film was cheap. You could get a roll of Super 8 with processing included for $3. So, which, nowadays $3 back then was like $30 now. So it wasn't that cheap, but it was still something that you could do. And you got like, I forget, 2.5 minutes worth of film on a cartridge. So if you planned your things out right, you could do pretty interesting things, and you could do film or animations and one of the, some of the first things I started doing were I became fascinated with animation, and I started doing a lot of animated things. And then it was, chasing the animals around the house or the family, or putting a little boat in the swimming pool and pretending I was in the middle of World War II or some kind of, all the silly things you do when you're a youngster. So,
of course.
especially in a small town, you're trying to amuse yourself because otherwise you're going to be really bored because there's nothing going on.
Do you have those films? Do you still have them?
I think they may be in the house in South Carolina somewhere, some of that stuff. I probably should go try to save them before everything gets destroyed and transfer them over to another medium so we can watch them.
Yeah, well, also that the film deteriorates after a while. I know I've worked on some retrospective kind of things for clients, and some of the older film is so fragile you can't even put it through the projector because it's deteriorating. You need to save the films.
Well, I got to save them. What I used to do too was when I was in school, I'd get Super 8 cartridges and I'd leave them on the dash of the car. I'd throw them up under the seat and ride around all summer, and then take them out and shoot them. And they got really interesting because the radiation from the sun or the heat, or it would make you get like really giant sized grains and or big globs of stuff on the film when you develop it, and so it wouldn't look like they wanted it to look. But I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes those mistakes are some of the best things, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, you get happy accidents that happen, and I would go out and shoot things. I remember one time we had an assignment to go out in a junkyard and shoot different things, and I shot this bolt that was sticking out of a piece of metal somewhere, and somehow I didn't set the camera right, and it was like 5 stops underexposed on slide film, which is like the kiss of death. But then the guy had it developed, and it was really interesting looking because it looked like this sort of dark monster coming out of the blackness. And so that sort of gave me some ideas. And I tend to embrace those ideas and think outside, differently than other people think when I do things sometimes, because to me, the ordinary is kind of boring, and I want to do something different.
Do people ever say to you, you need to look at this person's work and that person's work and that person's work before you start directing or producing or filming or being a DP? What do you say to them when they tell you that?
I say, go away.
I am so glad you said that, because I really believe that creative people need to have confidence in their own muse, in their own creativity. You need to listen to that voice. And I think that's why your work is so good, because you have that combination of being able to listen to your own voice, but then working with other people and keeping them happy. It's difficult to do. It's really difficult to do.
It's very difficult. And, it's you have to balance a lot of personalities when you're working on the set, and you have to do things in a way that you make every person on the set happy and still get done what you need to get done to satisfy the needs of the script, because everything comes down to the script. You read the script. I mean, I've read so many scripts now. When I read a script, I watch the movie in my head as I read the script. Mm-hmm. I already know what the movie, at least in my mind, is formulating to be. And then when I finally meet with the director after I've read the script, I'm like, well, I don't know how you see this, but when I read the script, I saw this, and I saw these images here, and this here, and this here, and this here. And this is what the script told me it needed to be, or the movie needed to be. And sometimes we'll agree and sometimes we'll disagree, but it's a starting point for us to have the conversation about where we're going to go with the film and what the film is going to eventually become. And that's incredibly important, because what you have to realize is when you start making a film, everybody has to be making the same movie. You can't have somebody be making one movie over here and another movie over there. I mean, they all have to be coming together for a common purpose and with a common vision, so that you accomplish what the director wants to see out of that script. Because essentially it's the director's movie, and you're there to help him or her bring that to fruition to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back in the late 70s. You're working on your master's in media arts, right? You're at University of South Carolina. And then when did you start shooting news? Because see, I think news is a great training ground for several reasons. But when did you start working in news in Columbia?
When I was in graduate school. When I was in graduate school at WIS Television in Columbia, South Carolina. I was the NBC affiliate. Mm-hmm. And I was what they called a news trainee. So I would be I'd in the morning I'd go to my classes. In the afternoon, I was a graduate teaching assistant in charge of the Oxbury animation stand. And in the evening, about 6 o'clock, I would go to the news station, get in my little van with a dish on top, and go with the reporters out until about midnight or 1 in the morning, and then come home and get back up about 6 and go back and get ready for class. And so it was a pretty full schedule. But we had, it was back when Iran had the hostages. It was, so we went to a lot of hostage rallies. I got to shoot interviews with Count Basie and John Connolly, who was in the car with JFK when he was shot. John actually got shot as well, sitting beside him. And so it was a pretty fascinating time for me. And that was back when you had a separate tape recorder, like what we called a Portapack, that used 3/4-inch tape. We had cameras that were tube cameras, so if you pointed them anything bright too long, it would burn the tube, so you had to be really careful of those. And then, so you'd carry, each one of those things were about 40 pounds. Then you had 2 battery belts, you had a sun gun, and you had a Electro Voice 635 mic on a fairly long cable for the reporter, and you're carrying all that around. It was as heavy as carrying a Steadicam. And we'd be running around carrying all this stuff, and it was, and going to school board meetings or protest or whatever needed to be done. So I had a microwave dish on top of the van. They told us every time we turned it on, we lost a kid.
Oh,
because of the microwave transmitters. It wasn't very clean transmission back then. So,
it was dangerous. Let's get into. We'll talk offline about 5G.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I carried those battery bricks around too. Actually, it took me many years to throw them away because there was so many memories with that equipment, right? But I think, what did you learn doing news that you think you carried into the next phase?
Well, you learn when somebody's out there blowing somebody away, you can't ask them to do it twice. You got to get it the first time. It's like, if you see something, and you'd see really horrific things, and it would be like, well, I'd go out in the van, whoever was with me before or whoever had the van previously, 2 of the lights would burn out, and I'd only have 1 light left. And you do with what you got, and in the news business, if you could see it, it was good. It didn't have to be artistic. It just had to be documented. So, but it's some of the best training you can ever have for the film business, because you learn that you can't fool around and you don't have time to get second chances. You better get it right the first time, or you may not get another chance. And a lot of times that's true in the film business too. There may only be 1 good take,
right?
And you better get it. I did 2 TV movies with Anne Bancroft, and when that she wasn't a big woman, but whenever she turned it on, you just prayed you were in the right spot to catch it, because it was going to come out of her whether you were ready or not. She was a very strong actress. Marcia Gay Harden's the same way. She's got very strong. She emotes very strongly too. So, I've seen a lot of great performances through my lens. It's like having the best seat in the house at a wonderful play every day of your life.
Do you feel like you look at life through your lens, even when you're not shooting? I know I do. I have people tell me, when I'm not working, I always have a camera. Do you do that?
Well, I carry my iPhone around with me because, I saw a quote from Annie Leibovitz one time, and it was, and somebody asked her, what's the best camera available now for a beginning photographer? And she said an iPhone. And because the best camera that you can have is the one you have with you at the time you see the shot. So whether you have it on an iPhone or an SLR or a Super Panavision 70, you can just, you see the image is in your head, you capture that image, and then that's the image that you have. I've been to Italy and France a few times over the last few years, and I'd send back pictures, and people say, these pictures are beautiful. What'd you take them with? And when I tell them it was an iPhone, they can't believe it. And sometimes people put like little teary faces and stuff, and I'm like, you didn't feel that way before I told you it was an iPhone. If I never told them it was with an iPhone, they never would have realized what I took it with,
Absolutely.
It's not the size of the wrench, it's the person behind it.
Absolutely.
So, if in your mind's eye you see something, and whatever tool you have with you allows you to capture that, then you've done well.
That's awesome. You are doing what you are supposed to do. Doesn't it feel like that? Does it feel like life has brought you to where you want to be?
Well, I mean, I lived in that little small town, and I thought, making movies was impossible, so I would try it so I could fail and come home and get a real job like raising pigs. But it worked, and I'm still here, and I'm living in Los Angeles, and I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm really pretty happy with that. Yeah, I pinch myself every day because it's like I'm really getting to do this. This is amazing to me. It's fascinating and amazing, and I still love it and love to do it whenever I get the chance. So it's. I mean, I've heard several people say this quote, but if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, and that's kind of the way I look at it. I just want to keep on doing it as long as I'm allowed to do it, and I think they'll put me in the coffin, and I'll be hanging out with one arm with a camera sticking out on the way in that'll be the hardest thing for the undertakers, to get that last arm in the box.
You'll be lying there going, "Wait a minute, it's not. I can't shoot. It's totally dark in here."
Yeah. Move the light a little bit this way.
Can you leave a crack?
People crying, or
I need a crack. I need a crack through the coffin so I can shoot the crowd. Oh my goodness! Talk to me about your when you went into learning Steadicam, because Garrett Brown's a wonderful person. What was it like studying under him?
Garrett is still one of my dearest friends to this day, and we met in December 17th, 1982, in Miami, and that's where I went to the Steadicam class that Garrett and Toby Phillips and Randy Nolan taught me how to do Steadicam, and I was in there with my other two fellow students that really did well. Were a guy from Paris named Jacques Mange, and a guy from Florida named Robert Uland. And both of them, sadly, are passed away now. But they both did some amazing work. Jacques went back to Paris and became the Steadicam guy in Paris for many, many years. And Bob he always lived in Florida, but he traveled all around and did a lot of major movies. And so it's been a great run. Garrett is undeniably a genius. And not only did he invent the Steadicam, but he invented the Skycam and all. Whenever you watch the Olympics and you see the people dive off of the high dive, and the camera follows them down and goes into the water, that's one of Garrett's cameras. I think. And then there's one when they run obstacles and do races, the cameras that fly along with the runners as they're going along, that's one of Garrett's cameras. Then the Skycam, where the camera comes from above on cables, that's one of Garrett's cameras. And the other thing that Garrett's done that I'm not sure how many people know this, but he's also the voice of Molson Golden in all the beer commercials.
I didn't know that. Voice. I did not know that. Oh my goodness.
That's Garrett Brown, and he started out as a folk singer. So,
so do you guys ever play music together?
No, we haven't. But he had an album out, and I think you can find it if you dig around. I forgot the name of his group, but if you look for Garrett Brown, you should be able to find it. And but he lives now and has always lived in Philadelphia. He never left Philadelphia and still went around and did movies all over the world. So he's and just a dear friend, a brilliant man. Somebody that you're very happy to know and love.
Mm-hmm. So you were learning about the Steadicam. Do you remember the first thing you shot using the Steadicam?
I did. Well, I went and I went through the school, and that was 1982, and I got a call from Earl Owensby Studios in Shelby, North Carolina, and because an equipment dealer that I knew that I bought a few cameras and stuff from in Charlotte had gotten a Steadicam from John Barry Group out in Australia, and they got it down to Myrtle Beach, and they were doing a movie called Chain Gang, and it was in 3D, and they didn't know how to work the Steadicam and didn't know how to adjust it, and so they said, well, my friend said, I know this guy who has just come out of the school. We should bring him down here. So I went down there, and the Steadicam had been, they had a 51-pound arm that had been modified with super long screws in it, and they had a little light Airflex camera on it, but the arm was cranked up so high that the arm was standing straight up in the air, and so had way too much spring tension on it for the camera that was on the Steadicam. But at the time, the factory didn't make adjustable arms, so I looked at it, and I saw it was a 51-pound arm, which was for the ARRI 35BL, which is much heavier, and I started taking the arm apart because I've always liked to take things apart. And my mother would come in and she'd give me a radio, and I'd take the radio apart and put it back together, and it would still work. I'd have a handful of parts left over, but it still worked. So it was like, that's how you learn,
You'd have parts left over and it still worked. I remember my parents walked in on me when I lived in France, and I was on the hardwood floor, and I had taken apart the telephone. And I had parts everywhere, because back then the telephones were really interesting. They were horrified. Yeah. Anyway, so you started taking this arm apart. Was the production horrified? Were they scared?
No. They were out doing other things. They didn't even know I was doing it, but I was bound and determined to get to the base of what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled the covers off the springs on the arm, and I noticed that the Australians had put like really long screws in the arm for the spring adjustments. And so I took those screws and I dialed them down and dialed them down and dialed them down. And then until I got the arm where it should rest for the particular camera that we had. And so I got that going. And then the other thing I had to do was I had to make a plate for the camera at top, because the 3D lens was so big and heavy that it made the Steadicam front heavy. Now, I didn't have enough adjustment to get it further back. So we made that plate. Or actually, maybe I just taped I taped an extra battery on the back of the Steadicam to balance it out. Anyway, I got it balanced out to where it worked like it should. And then all of a sudden I was like the guy, And I did about 6 movies with Earl Studio. And then after that, Dino De Laurentiis had opened a studio in Wilmington, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And so I started hitting them up, and I put together a reel, which is basically me chasing my little brother around the house in Columbia, South Carolina, around the yard and crawling over a fence, and the camera just followed him wherever he went. And I sent that reel up to Dino De Laurentiis to the Joe Dunton cameras up there, and they watched it and they started telling everybody about it. And I didn't get Cat's Eye and I didn't get Firestarter, but there was this movie called Blue Velvet that they called me and they said, "Do you want to do this movie called Blue Velvet?" And I said, "Sure." And I was on one of the Owensby movies at the time, and I had a travel day going between Shelby and Hilton Head Island where we were going to shoot, and they were shooting Blue Velvet in Wilmington. And so I just swung through Wilmington on the travel day, spent the night there, and I said, "Well, who's shooting this thing?" And I pulled the call sheet out, and it was David Lynch. And I was like, we'd all seen Dune, and my friend and I in South Carolina, and we said, well, if there's anybody we could work with in this business, it would be David Lynch. He'd be the guy, And so I didn't sleep at all at night, and I stood in front of the mirror looking at myself, saying, "You can do this, you can do this," So then we get there, and it's a big 35 BL camera with about a 7-pound anamorphic lens on it, and I get it all set up. I'd bought the Steadicam that we'd used on Chain Gang earlier, and so I had enough arm to hold it all. But I only had 2 shots in the movie. One was Kyle MacLachlan walking up with the bug sprayer up to Dorothy Valen's apartment, and then the other one was he comes busting out of the doorway, and he and Laura Dern run back down the stairs talking about the key that he's stolen so he can get back into Dorothy's apartment later. And those were my 2 shots in Blue Velvet. Well, I shoot those, and I go down to Hilton Head, and I shoot down there. And then they call me. They track me down in Hilton Head, and they say, "You got to come back." And I said, "What?" And they said, "We had some kind of lens problem. You got to come back. It wasn't anything to do with you, but, we got to shoot everything all over again."
Oh, my goodness.
It just happened to be on the travel. Yeah, it just happened to be on the travel day that I was going back up to Shelby for a night shoot. So I drove to Wilmington. I reshot all those shots, threw the stuff in the car, drove from one side of North Carolina to the other, landed in Shelby, and then did a whole night shoot, stayed up all night. So that was a long day.
No kidding. Oh, my goodness.
But it led to an ongoing relationship with David Lynch to this day. And because we did Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart, then Twin Peaks, then Lost Highway, or actually Firewalk with Me, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, plus some music video and commercial work. And so all of that just all happened because of a travel day and a few shots. And actually, the new Criterion Blue Velvet disc that just came out has the footage. David found the underexposed footage in a warehouse in Seattle. How it got up there, we don't know. But it's got those lost shots in it. And then it's also got a documentary of us making Blue Velvet, which is really strange to see myself from 1985 with my little Steadicam, you know. And then there's an interview that we did several years ago. That it's a series of interviews called what is it? It's by Benedict Fancy, a filmmaker up in Wilmington, where we went back to the locations where we did Blue Velvet and got on that stairwell and actually walked through and talked about how we did it, and this is where we did this and that, and it's pretty fascinating. So if you get that Criterion disc, you can have all this, and so that was kind of fun, and that got me from doing the first Earl Owensby movies in Shelby. We blew everything up. And we'd shoot somebody with a machine gun. We wouldn't shoot them once. We'd put 100 bullet hits on them, and they'd die in slow motion for like 5 minutes, and blood would go everywhere.
Oh, come on. Blowing things up is so much fun.
Oh, yeah, it is. We had a 40-foot tractor trailer full of bombs, you know.
Oh, my goodness. So you went from blowing things up to the very introspective, psychological thriller kind of stuff that David Lynch was doing at the time. It was kind of a little shift, wasn't it?
Yes, but it was fascinating, and you know, David and I have gotten along really well for years because we just clicked, and it got to the point. There was, like on Wild at Heart, there's a scene where Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern go dancing out at the old Palomino nightclub, which used to be out in the valley. And we were filming there, and it's where Nicolas Cage, and the punk comes up and tries to dance with Laura Dern, and Nicolas Cage, and he says, "You got a stupid looking jacket." Nicolas Cage says, "This is a snakeskin jacket, a symbol of my individuality and personal freedom." And then they have a little bit of a fight, and then Nicolas Cage and Laura dance. But it's like that scene, the direction I got was to go out there and get it. And so I went and shot it, and then I came back after I ran out of film, and David said, "What'd you get?" I said, "Well, I did this. I got these parts of the scene." "Okay, go out and get what you didn't get before."
Oh, nice.
And he just trusted me, and I knew, you know, we developed a rapport where we sort of knew I knew what he wanted, and I just would do it, you know. And well, I mean, it was basically, I shot one side of the scene, which would be Laura's side with the speed metal band in the background. And then I turned around and did Nicholas's side, and it would be like floating into overs, floating and doing wider shots and moving around the camera. I'd constantly just move in from a close up to a wide shot to other things. I mean, the whole scene is basically a couple of Steadicam shots with maybe a high angle and a low angle from stationary cameras later on. But that was pretty much it. And we really developed a rapport. And then let's see, so we did that. Then we did Twin Peaks, and that was 90 and 91. And I was on every episode of that except for the pilot, I think. And then we did Firewalk with Me, where we actually went up to Seattle and shot the whole film up there. And then after that, it was Lost Highway.
I don't know how you keep track of everything. You have so many credits.
I have to look at IMDb to see what I've done because I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, so what is David doing now? Are you guys still working on things together now?
I didn't work on the new Twin Peaks. They had a whole new crew. But David has got the David Lynch Foundation now, which is for it originally was formed to help kids learn through meditation, and then it evolved into like veterans, or military veterans, to help them overcome PTSD, and it's kind of developing this massive worldwide organization now for TM, and so he's pretty busy with that. And then he also, David's foundation, or his what he started out with was being a painter, and so he paints a lot as well. So he's a pretty prolific individual. So his paintings are massive, and they're very interesting, and you can immediately look at one and tell it's David's painting. It's nobody else does paintings like David. So that's really. I love going to his shows when he has openings, because I always see interested in new things, and he makes furniture and does other things too. But in addition to being a master filmmaker.
So in the days when you were using the Steadicam, and you did that for many years. I think it was just recently that you sort of dialed that down a little bit, right? But you were 2010. You were there in the heyday. I mean, the Steadicam was still fairly new, right?
Mm-hmm. And you could count everybody on two hands that was doing it when I started.
Mm-hmm. What was your style back then that gave you some notoriety? What caused people to kind of notice your work? What do you looking back?
Well, I went to the school in Miami, and then I went back to South Carolina for 5 years by myself and developed my bad habits. And but my style was always a little different than all other Steadicam operators. I mean, people notice it, and it's where some of them were more rock solid and dolly-like. I was always, the camera always had a bit of a motion and a float to it that was it became a character, which, a lot of us, when we would film things, the Steadicam could be either an observer or a participant. So it can kind of float back and forth between those things. So my style was always a little more flowing, and although I could be precise, sometimes I wasn't precise on purpose, or I would put the camera where it needed to be in other ways. So
would I be right in saying that in a lot of the scenes your camera was the POV of the character? Because it feels alive when I look at some of the clips you've put up of your work. It breathes.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it breathes.
The opening of Scream with Drew Barrymore, where I shot that, that's always very. I did a few things. It's a fairly solid take, but I did things like when I'd push in on her when she get the weird phone calls and things, I'd just twist the camera just ever so slightly when the guy started threatening her, when it started getting strange, and then we chased her around the house and out the front door, and there was a lot of different things that went on. Wes Craven said the next day after he'd seen the dailies, it was the best first day's dailies he'd ever had on any movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wes was awesome. A lovely man. I did 2 movies with him. The Scream, and then The People Under the Stairs. And but I was constantly working on different movies. So sometimes I'd do 3 movies in 3 different towns in a week, and so I'd do part of Scream, and then I'd go and do another movie in another town, another movie in another town. I'd wake up in a hotel room, I wouldn't know where I was, and I'd go look out the window, I still wouldn't know where I was. I'd have to find a phone book to know what town I was in.
Well, you must have been exhausted. I don't know how you did it all, but you're still doing it.
Yeah, it was really pretty crazy. There was a lot of times where I spent my life in super shuttles and on airplanes and in hotel rooms, and it was not unusual for me to lose 5 pounds a day carrying this weight around, because sometimes I carry 18 hours a day. I'd carry 100 pounds around, so and not all of it would be walking. Some of you running, going up and down stairs, jumping on and off of cranes, mounted to vehicles. The opening of Lost Highway is the title sequence is me hanging off the front of a camera car in low mode with an Arri 3 with a Panavision anamorphic about 2 inches off the road, going 35 we're going 35 miles an hour in 24-degree weather, and the camera's running 6 frames a second, so it's the equivalent of 140 miles an hour. And I had to hang out there for 16 minutes in the wind chill for so we'd have the full roll of film to put the titles on, because we needed the full 4-minute roll for all the main titles of the movie. And I had on 2 pairs of long johns, all my street clothes, a snowmobile suit, a ski mask, 2 pairs of gloves. And by the end of the run, I could only open one eye. I couldn't feel my fingers, and I'd slobbered all over my face. But it was worth it, because the camera looks very good, you know, and David still tells the story about how cold it was and how long I hung out there.
You couldn't come back in. You were frozen.
I was there. And I had to be very careful, because if we hit a bump and I let the camera go down further than the 2 inches above the pavement, it would hit the pavement, and then the whole camera would be sucked up under the camera car and be destroyed. So it was quite an undertaking, you know.
No pressure.
So
no pressure.
No, you just do what you got to do. It's what's got to be done. It's like the opening of Wild at Heart. I'm running up and down the stairs with Nicolas Cage, and he has the fight with the black guy and beats his head into the terrazzo floor, and we're all over those carpeted stairs down at the Elks Lodge downtown. And I think they call it the Park Plaza Hotel now, but it was the Elks Lodge when we shot there. They shot Journey videos there, and I worked on another movie there called Rockstar, where we shot upstairs, and we carried Technicranes up the stairs. And then, we did another thing for I think it was LG 3D televisions and stuff, where we did a bunch of stuff in there too. So it's a popular location down by MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. And but I mean, I did all those things for David. And then I did a couple movies for Quentin Tarantino. I did 2 for Joel Schumacher and 2 for Wes Craven. And then there's all kind of other movies and television shows and stuff. It just all runs together in my mind. People will say, "Did you do that?" And I just found one on IMDb the other day yesterday that I'd done, and I forgot to put a credit in on it. So I had to add a credit yesterday for one from 15 years ago because I'd done so many, and I said, "Oh yeah, I worked on that one. I better stick my name on that one too." But I mean, you know, the whole opening of Jackie Brown was me with Steadicams and dollies and stuff, because I was a camera and Steadicam operator on that. And then I did the Steadicam on Grindhouse, the Death Proof segment of Grindhouse with Quentin too. So,
well, I saw you at NAB, and you were leaving to go on a shoot. Were you going to Africa? Where were you going when I saw you at NAB in April?
Oh, in April, I was going down to Tucson to scout a cowboy movie that I'm supposed to do in November.
Oh, okay. All right.
And because I'd just come back from doing something else, and then I've got a movie I'm supposed to shoot before November in a house that Albert Einstein used to live in, a beach house Albert Einstein used to live in, and so and that's going to be sort of like a big chill with a haunted twist at the end sort of thing. So that'll be fun. And it's not a dull life, you know.
It's a wonderful life. How do you manage to have, 24/7 sounds like with you?
Well, it can be, you know. It depends. Like, beginning of this year has been a little slow, but then things are starting to pick up now, and it's probably going to be like a rat race all the way to the end, you know. But a happy rat race, though, you know, little happy rats running.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So you made the switch from Steadicam to becoming a cinematographer DP. Do you like that? Tell me about that world for you.
I do like that. I'm actually happier doing that than I was as a Steadicam operator. I mean, we just had a premiere of our movie about Mary Pickford called "Why Not Choose Love: A Mary Pickford Manifesto" at the Ace Hotel downtown in the United Artists Theater that Mary designed, and we showed our Mary Pickford movie, and it's the 100th anniversary of United Artists this year, which Mary founded. So that showing went really well. We had 800 people there, and it was fun for me because I got to make modern day Arri Alexas look like 1909 film cameras, and so that was a bit of a challenge. And we had really great performers. Jennifer D'Elia was the director. Sophie Kennedy Clark played Mary Pickford. Carrie Elwes played D.W. Griffith. Luke Arnold played Douglas Fairbanks. And we had Balthazar Getty in it, who I already knew from Lost Highway. And it turned out to be a really interesting, good little film that I got to pull out all the stops and make it. It doesn't look like any movie you've ever seen.
Can we see it? Is it out somewhere where we can see it?
We still got to do a few little things to it before they're going to release it, I think. And so what's going on is we still got to do titles. I want to do one final color pass and things like that. But then, it should be out, I'm guessing, in the next year or so.
You were talking about how it didn't look like any other movie I've ever seen. Can you keep going there? Because I all of a sudden I'm going, oh, well, I want to see it, and I interrupted you. My mouth moves too fast sometimes. I apologize. This is so fascinating. So you were starting to tell us what was different about this film.
Well, it doesn't look like any film you've ever seen. The story is not like any other film you've ever seen. It all takes place in Mary Pickford's head, and it's the premise of it, which is sort of the background material, is Mary Pickford was offered Sunset Boulevard by Billy Wilder, who wrote the script for her, and she turned it down. And the part eventually went to Gloria Swanson. But our film takes place in her mind from between the time she gets the script and when she turns it down, as she looks back through her life from 1909 to about 1949. And it's a very it's a very different film. It's a very beautiful film. The performances are amazing. The direction's very good. Everything really kind of works with it, but it's not like your conventional movie. So I think it's worth seeing, not only because it's a good film, but also because it's very different than anything you've ever seen before or ever will see again. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you like directing?
I've directed a few little things. Earlier in my life, I didn't think I had anything to say, but I think I'm finally getting to the point where I could have something to convey to other people, And I work with a lot of first-time directors, and I get to help guide them sometimes. It's my job is to serve the script and the director. That's the whole reason I'm there. I'm not there to take any glory for myself. I'm just there to help them make the movie that's in their head and to serve the script. Because the script is, I lecture at a lot of universities, and I've taught at AFI and places like that, and University of South Carolina, where I went to school, and I always say, like, the script. My grandfather used to build houses on my mother's side, and I always looked at the script like the foundation of the house. If you got a bad foundation, your house is going to fall down. But if you got a good foundation or a good script, then you've got something to build upon to make that house and be a good, sturdy house that'll last forever. But you have to be faithful to it and not try to do too many modifications, because the script itself tells you everything that movie needs to be. It's right there on the pages. You just look at it, you read it, you know exactly what you need to be doing. And so if you follow that and are faithful to that, and you and the director see eye to eye on what that should be, then you come out and you can make a lovely film. If you and the director are not seeing eye to eye and butting heads, it's not going to be a very pleasant experience, and the film's not going to be very good.
No, you're right. You're right.
And so it's. I mean, that being said, sometimes you get a bad script, and the right director and the right actors can save it. We had a scene in school making chicken salad out of chicken shit, and and so you'd have to you take what you're given and you do the absolute best you can with that, and you go forward. It's like I mean, when they first gave me the script.
How do you shoot that? Blah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, it's like, well, like a perfect example is they gave me the script for Scream, which when they gave me the script, it was called Scary Movie. That was the original name of the movie. And I read the script and I thought, oh man, this is awful. You know, this is not a very good script. But you know, other people disagreed, and that group of actors they brought in, and Wes Craven, it turned out to be an amazing film. It's like one of the classic horror films of all time. You know, for 10 years, whenever they talked about horror films, they show the opening that I shot with Drew Barrymore, and it was like, for 10 years, I'm not kidding, every time they talk about horror films, there were those shots. And so the lesson to be learned from this is you got to treat every movie you work on like the Oscar winner, because you never know which one's going to do it. And you never know which one's going to strike it with the audience and with people and the people involved, what they're going to do to make things actually a great film out of it. I mean, I've had directors tell me to do things back when I was operating for them, and I wouldn't understand, but I'd watch and I'd do it. And I'd do it with enthusiasm, of course, you know, but then when I saw the film, I saw exactly why they wanted me to do that, because they had something very specific in mind that I wasn't really grasping at that moment in time. And so every time I read a script and think about it and watch the movie that I see, I always think of like, well, what would the director think about this? And, you know, then we start the dialogue. I mean, when we did the Mary Pickford film, Jen D'Elia and I started meeting 8 months before we shot the movie. We met and we started talking. We met for lunch, and then we'd talk, and then we'd look at pictures of Mary, and we'd go and discuss for months. And then we brought in the production designers and the costumers, and we'd sit down and say, well, if we did this, and if we did this, and if we did this, we could have this effect, and how do we want this scene to sell, and blah, 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 all these things. And it's a luxury to be able to do that, because then you can have time to really hone in on what you're trying to do. Because some films you get, and you come in like a week or 2 days before they want to roll cameras, and they're saying, okay, we're going to shoot. And I'm like, okay, we're going to shoot. Sure.
You know, it's hard to be creative when you don't have any time to let your mind wander. Your mind has to wander. You have to, you know, you have to allow that.
Absolutely. So you need time for that, the ideas to gel and things. But I mean, I'm good from the news days. I'm good at landing on my feet and shooting, you know. So, and the films that I've shot that way, they still look good. They still work. It's all these things are important though. So it just becomes a different movie if you do that approach to it than if you have time to really set it up. And Mary needed time to for us to think it through and to gel it, because it's a very different approach with the art direction. With the costumes are amazing, the performances are amazing, but we got some really incredible images that we wouldn't have done if we just jumped into it and just said, okay, shoot it, you know. But it's a different. I think if you have a movie where you want a frantic feel to it, and having a short prep time on it may give you that. You won't be able to like think out long-term results on it. But some movies, they don't want that. Some they just shoot it, be done with it, move on to the next one, you know. So I tend to want to do interesting things though. So having a little time to think it over is a bonus to me. So.
Dan, you're an eternal optimist. I love the way you take any situation and try to turn it into something positive. I think that's wonderful. What is the one thing you think the younger generation needs to hear from you that you would want to say to them? There's a lot of kids out there with iPhones, with the DSLRs. They can't afford or even don't want some of the larger cameras that we grew up with. What do you tell them about what's important to take with them so that they can have their story come to life?
Don't try to start at the top. Get in with a camera department or whatever department you want to be with. work with people that are better than you are, and learn. Because if you start at the top, you're robbing yourself of a foundation of really great knowledge that you can learn from others. I mean, I started out in South Carolina, and we might do a job as a loader or an operator or a DP or whatever, but I've done all the jobs in the camera department.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is I've worked under some amazing directors and amazing camera people, and I have a theory that I call eyes open, mouth shut. And
that's awesome.
Which means what that is if you see somebody doing something, watch them and try to figure out what they're doing rather than asking them what they're doing. Because if you watch them and figure out what they're doing and say, oh, that's why they're doing that, you'll remember that forever. Mm-hmm. But if you ask them a question and they say, oh, I just do this because of that, you'll forget it. And it's not ingrained in your brain. And one of the things in this business is you want to take the knowledge that you learn and the things that you see and file them away. So when you go and do another film, you won't have the exact same situations, but you'll be able to say, oh, well, in this film we did this and this worked that way. If I modify that here, I should get a result similar to this. And you can draw upon all that knowledge that you've saved up over the years. And I just realized it's been since the news days. I've been doing this for 40 years, and there's a lot of knowledge in that. I mean, I worked with Alan Davio, Alex Thompson, Uli Steiger, all these wonderful cameramen, and Roy Wagner, Bob Primes, just amazing amounts of knowledge just to work with these people and have them say, if you did it this way, it might be better, and this would be better, and this would help you, and if you do this way, you'll run into trouble with this. And these are things that you file away rather than having to learn it all over again and start at square one.
Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, it's always good to listen to your elders and to learn from them because they've been through the wars, and that's really always very important.
I'm sure there are times when you give a commitment and then somebody that you care about very much calls you and you can't do it. That's really hard, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, Spike Jones and Michael Bay and Chivo, all these guys, when I was really busy, they were like, oh, can you come do this? Or they'd have their people call me, and I'm like, I can't wedge it in. I can't fit it in there. I was so busy that I just didn't. I just couldn't work at everybody I wanted to, and it in a way it pains you, but I think you get the jobs you're meant to have, and that other people get the jobs they're supposed to have, and if you get a job that where they really wanted somebody else and they hired you, and then it's never a comfortable situation, and my thoughts on that are, you should hire who you want, don't hire me because of whatever reason. Go hire the people that you want to hire and use them. And then you'll be happy, and I'll be happy, and I'll go work with other people that thought of me, and rather than like just filling a hole or a void, So
mm-hmm.
it's because I get along with everybody, but it's like some people are determined not to get along with anybody.
Yeah,
and
there are a lot of interesting characters in our business. I want to take a slight detour, but I want to talk to you. I can't talk to someone like you without bringing up the subject of light. Obviously, we have story, we have, and we'll talk about technology in a minute, but light. Isn't it all about light?
Well, we're as John Alton said in his book, we're painting with light. So making a movie is very simple. If you put the camera in the right place with the right lens on it, you put the lights in the right place, you put the mark in the right place, you put the actor on the mark, and you roll the camera, and you got a movie. But it's taken me 40 years to figure out what the right place is.
There you go.
I watch so many student films and films by people that are try to start out at the top and stuff, and the camera's in the wrong place. And I'm like, that's kind of, but I've had it pounded into my head how to do an over, how to do a single, how to do a wide shot, and how to do, it's like, This is stuff you learn with experience and by working with people that are better than you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to this day, my hiring practice is to find people that are better than I am and let them do their jobs when they're on my crew. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't try to be a micromanager, and because I've been micromanaged and I know what it feels like, and other people might have a better idea than you do. That's one of the biggest mistakes if you're a leader is to think that you have all the ideas and nobody else has any. So that's a really, really important thing to remember.
So when you're working as a DP, you have to find camera people that you really trust too. It's the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
I've had the same focus puller for 30 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Stephen Mann, yeah, he's been my focus. He pulled Focus on Glory when they won the Oscar. He was the lead focus puller on Glory when they won the Oscar, and then since I've been in Los Angeles, he's been my main focus puller on all my Steadicam work, except for some of the David Lynch stuff, which Scott Ressler, who's now a professor at the North Carolina School of the Arts, teaching cinematography there, he was a focus puller for me many times. And then on Mary Pickford, I had Steve pulling focus, and Scott came in and operated some of the extra camera stuff. My main two camera operators were Dan Gold and Mitch Dubin, and Dan did all did Spider-Man and unknown movies, and Mitch did the last 15 Spielberg movies. So it's like, if I have talent like that around me, and my gaffer's Dwight Campbell, who gaffed Always and Far and Away and The Abyss, and you surround yourself by these talented people, and you let them do what they know how to do. That's very important. And because, I mean, I've gone into jobs and movies where I had to do everything because I had crews that were put upon me, and I'm not saying that they were bad, but it's like I'd have to like tell them everything and watch them and things. But when you have a great group of people surrounding you, you just let them do their jobs. And then you make suggestions, and I'll watch everything on monitors. I'll be just adjusting filtration. I'll be adjusting lenses. I'll be saying stops and focal lengths and camera positions and everything. I'll control that via radios and stuff through monitors. But a lot of times it's just you let people do what they do.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you've won so many awards too, because people love what you do, and you've had an amazing career. How has technology challenged you? Because things have really changed since that first Super 8 camera that your mom had to now, where you could be shooting on just about any kind of camera, but the analog to digital was a huge jump, and everything in between. You seem like the kind of person that adapts easily, or was it hard for you?
I try to stay on top of all the latest stuff, or a lot of it, but now it's coming through at like an astronomical rate. So it's like, it's almost overwhelming in a way, but you have to still learn a little bit about each one of these things and what might be the best way to do it. But again, it comes back to it's not the size of the wrench, it's the person behind the wrench.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a great movie, and as they told us when I went to the University of Southern California and studied cinema there as well, and when they told us, they said you can make an absolute great movie in Super 8 or a home movie in Super Panavision 70. It's not, it's not the thing that you capture it with. It's the story, it's the script, it's the actors. Now, there are a lot of people that would argue that fact, but there's a movie called Celebration that was shot on a palm quarter, and it got distributed. David Lynch shot in on the Empire on a PD-150 because he could let Laura Dern act for an hour, and he had a 1 hour cassette, and he didn't have to cut her, and he could just let her run. And he loved to be able to do that.
This isn't really an interview about gear, but I would like to ask you about perhaps your favorite lenses or some of your favorite tools that, given the chance, you like to work with. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the lenses and cameras and different tools that I like to work with. I mean, my favorite camera now, and it has been for a while, is the Airflex Alexa. And I usually put either Zeiss Super Speeds on it or in case of Mary Pickford, we use Panavision Ultra Speeds. I mean, right now there's a renaissance in glass coming out. When the digital cameras first came out, there weren't that many lenses around, and so we're having like a flood of new lenses from all different sources come in now, which is really great for us because we have a lot of different things to choose from. But I still like the older glass now because some of the new stuff is just too friggin' sharp, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and when it is sharp, it's razor sharp in one plane, and then they're not very forgiving. They fall out really quick, and it's not like the depth of field thing. It's like it's razor sharpness and then not so sharp. So whereas the other lenses the older lenses I use, they tend to roll into into focus over. They slowly roll into focus and then they slowly roll out, and they're more forgiving. The older lenses. What happens with older lenses is they're more forgiving focus-wise. They don't have just like one plane that's super sharp and everything else is falling off. They roll into an area of focus and they roll back out. They never quite get as sharp as some of the new lenses. They're a little bit softer, but on digital cameras, I find that is more interesting to me, because the digital sensors tend to get clinical sometimes, mm-hmm. and get very sterile. And so I want things to work with them to kind of take that digital edge off of. Whereas film kind of did it on its own. And with a digital camera, the sensor is in one place. It doesn't move. All the color pixels are on the same plane. And with film, you had 3 layers, and the film was always moving in the gate, flopping around. So it took out a lot of ills with film, because the lenses would shoot further into the emulsion for different wavelengths of light, and the film itself was moving back and forth in the gate. So that gave you a little extra leeway. When digital first came out, for focus pullers, we always kind of looked at it like it was a widowmaker, because it was really difficult until people got used to it to pull focus on digital cameras, because mm-hmm. the film's forgiving in a way. And so, you know, the cameras I like right now, the Arri Alexa and the little Canons, pretty much, those are the ones that, like the C200 is really a nice Canon camera. And I'm hearing really good things about the Sony Venice. That seems to be nice. I just haven't shot anything with it yet. The Panasonic LT, Vericam LT, I liked a lot. There are a lot of different cameras out there now. A lot of people can make a decent sensor now, but it's just the way that the lens combination and then the color science behind that sensor really make them whether they work well or not. And so that's kind of tricky stuff. Again, is you need a way to capture that image. You need a way to with the sensor and with the lenses, and then with digital cameras, a lot of times you don't find yourself using 85s or color correcting filters, but you find diffusions are kind of important. So, and then what type of diffusion you use and where you put it, and other things like that. And then the other thing to remember is that once the cameras stop rolling, the director of photography's job is only halfway done. The other half of the job we got to do is the color correction. So you go in and do a DI after the fact, and that's where you do the other half of your direct photography work, or your DP work, is you go in and you take all this footage that you've captured, and then you finally hone in the color and what you see, and what, if there's anything that's been overexposed that you couldn't handle on the set. These things are all very important too. So in the theater, in the DI suite, usually the best way to do it is you go into a place that has a big screen, like a 25-foot screen with a calibrated projector, usually a Barco or some other really high-end $100,000 projector that's been calibrated to be color accurate. And you sit there with the colorist and you go through the movie shot by shot, and you say, okay, this shot's a little too green, this shot's a little too red, this one we could sharpen it up a little bit if we needed to or not, or or there's a big overexposure. What can we do with that? Or can we bring up crush the blacks here, or whatever you want to do for the image that you're trying to get, and then you finally do your output and then make DIs and or make your DCP for projection or your ProRes, or however you're going to output the movie. But that's the other half of your job. And a lot of times people don't realize this, and they try to lock you out of the color suite, which is really to their disadvantage.
Ooh, that would be tragic.
Well, it happens, It happens. Like everybody. The thing that we're trying to avoid right now is that director of photography is being looked at as data gatherers and not artists. And it kind of started with sound in Pro Tools. Is the people were recording Pro Tools, and then they have a certain engineer that would record the main session, and then they'd go to change it, and they say, "Well, we don't need you anymore. We got your numbers," So, and
that's
but
sad.
There's certain things. Well, yeah, and it is sad, but there's certain ways I shoot things that I know that if I don't get to go in there and color them, they're not going to look good, because I'll take the camera down in the basement, and right where it where it barely hangs on there. And so if you try to print it up too much, it's going to turn into noise and icky colors and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things by design that the way that you want things to look. Mm-hmm. And the way the script needs, again, you come back to the script. The script requires this photography, and it needs to be in this way.
I think you're talking about the creative process and taking it from start to finish and working with the team. For anyone on the creative side to be shut out of the final process is really difficult.
Well, I mean, I just hope to keep making great films. I mean, I go to Europe or go to museums or travel the world and see different environments, a lot of times on somebody else's dime. And that to me is wonderful, because you're always having constant input into your mind as to what you could take and how you can manipulate that into something that you can use on a film or just something to give you joy in life. That's really one of the main things for me. And to just have constant curiosity and constant joy.
I think you'll have it. I wish that for you. I wish that it continues well into the future. I can't thank you enough for the time today, and I think that what you're talking about is going to be very inspiring to both the young filmmakers starting out and the people who've been around for a long time. We need more people like you in the business, Dan. So
thank you.
Thanks for your time and your generosity, and I hope that we get to talk again soon. I'd like to actually do another interview with you down the road, perhaps on camera, about the technology and the cameras and the lenses and sound and all of those aspects of the hardware side of what you do. That might be fun. But in the meantime, thanks for sharing your big heart with us. And I'd like to say this is Cirina Catania, and I'm signing off from OWC Radio and thanking Dan Kneece. And do you want people to go to dankneece.com? Where do you want them to go on the internet to learn more about you?
Well, they can go to dankneece.com, or they can go to put my name, DANKNEECE, into IMDb, and that'll have a lot of the different credits and things, ways. I think there's a way to reach me there, but you can certainly do it through my website or on Facebook as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, and thanks everyone for listening. And remember what I always tell you, get up off that chair and go do something wonderful today. Have a great day.